It's not hard to give advice. It's not hard to give people good advice. What's really hard is giving people the advice that they need to hear, but that they don't want to hear. I was in this position with my girlfriend as she began her strict adherence to Nina and Randa's clear skin diet, as she continued to adhere to it as her own acne got worse and worse, ultimately ending with her having tests done at a hospital and her having to confront the extent to which she had taken a scientific hypothesis and clung to it like a religious dogma until it became not just pseudoscientific but anti-scientific. She took something that could have been a positive, healthy experiment with a new and different diet, and she turned it into something that ruined her life for several months and, frankly, tore our relationship apart. So this is in part a narrative about a diet book, Nina and Randa's diet. It's in part a more personal narrative about my girlfriend's experience with the diet, and you can hear more from her perspective on her YouTube channel. And it's in part an even more personal narrative of the effects that this had on our relationship, which is, to some extent, philosophical. Here's what I mean. At the beginning, the middle, and the end of my girlfriend's adherence to the Nina and Randa diet, I insisted to her that what she was doing was an experiment. And I reminded her again and again that an experiment, by definition, is something with an outcome that remains unknown. I tried to prevent her from taking on the optimistic and yet fatalistic mentality that previously she had been given bad advice by doctors who wanted her to be a slave to medication, and that now she was liberated by the advice provided by this book. I pointed out to her at the beginning, the middle, and the end that she had ended up replicating the attitudes that she'd seen me criticize on this YouTube channel in like 2015, 2016, even 2017. The attitudes I'd criticized amongst the followers of Freely and Durian Rider, whereby they first took on a sort of anti-establishment bias of blaming a conspiracy of doctors, nurses, and hospitals, and then embraced a philosophy of using food as medicine. I noticed early on that Melissa had become really emotionally committed to the notion that the medical establishment had let her down the wrong path, that they had shown no concern for her welfare or health and put her on drugs that from her perspective would prevent her from ever really having, reproductive autonomy, or whatever would prevent her from having a baby. Because one large part of her treatment was getting on the birth control pill at an early age and remaining on the birth control pill, partly for birth control, it's one side effect, it's one benefit, but primarily because it prevented the eruption of her acne. Now, I would try to balance this narrative by pointing out to her that she was on medicine that had serious side effects, but also had serious benefits. She'd had a great quality of life and had clear skin and no acne from about age 14 to age 24, 10 years. And while I do not deny that the birth control pill has negative side effects, the positive effects and the motivations of the doctors in putting her on the pill should not be dismissed. And they shouldn't be dismissed because a fad diet book, like Nina Randa's diet book, is promising you that if only you adhere to the strictures of their diet strictly enough, it'll cure your acne. Now, let's be clear. Nina and Randa's diet, the only efficacy it can have in curing your acne is if there is something in your diet that's causing your acne. For example, if you are allergic to peanuts, or if you have something like an allergic reaction to almonds, and then eliminating peanuts and almonds from your diet eliminates your acne. So many people will have that effect. So in effect, this is the same kind of outcome as an elimination diet. And as you'll see in this video, elimination diets can be destructive and can be, in their way, pseudoscientific and very misleading for people. But if that was your problem, if that was why you had acne, then Nina and Randa's diet would seem to work for you miraculously. Right? This is not the only reason why women get acne. Hormonal acne indicates that you have a hormonal problem. And my girlfriend knew from day one of this experiment the nature of her acne was not dietary, it was hormonal. Okay? That's why taking the birth control pill solved the problem. All right, because the birth control pill suppresses your hormonal cycles. It changes the balance of hormones in your body all month round, of course, especially with reference to the menstrual cycle. So she was on a hormone-suppressing drug that alleviated her acne. And she got it into her head that she would quit this drug. She would quit all the medication she was on. She would just embrace strict adherence to this diet, and that would cure her acne. Now again, as an experiment, if you can do that experiment with detachment, that's one thing, but that's not what she did. She didn't have detachment. She wanted to believe in this diet. And I kept counseling her to have caution and detachment and scientific attitude, and for her to admit the imperfection of her body. And when I got back, when I say that, the imperfection of her body, what I mean is, do not start from the assumption that you are entitled to good health by birth, and that it is impossible that you will need medicine to have good health. Because that was precisely her attitude during this period of time. And I kept giving her counterexamples. I said to her at one point, I had another girlfriend, an ex-girlfriend, who needed to be on the birth control pill to live. She had a completely different health problem. The birth control pill solves a lot of hormonal problems women have. But another girlfriend with a completely different health problem, she had to be on a birth control pill. I gave her the example of people with dwarfism. A lot of people who have dwarfism, part of the problem is endocrine or is hormonal, and they were on a range of hormone treatments their whole lives just to try to have a relatively normal life or cope with their condition. There are all kinds of people born with all kinds of conditions where they can't take for granted that diet and exercise alone will solve their health problem. It's a ridiculous, dogmatic mentality. But that was precisely her mentality. It was familiar to me from critiques of me on the channel. Her mentality was that she was entitled to good health, that diet and exercise alone should guarantee this to her as her birthright, and that there was a kind of conspiracy of dunces in the medical establishment, that the doctors didn't care about her, that they weren't really trying to help her, or even that the doctors were trying to keep her down by giving her this medicine that had prevented her discovery of, or her earlier subscribing to this diet that would have solved all her problems. And she kept clinging to this, despite my counseling, despite my kind of having interventions, despite the fact that her acne got worse and worse as she adhered to the diet more and more tightly. Now, what do I mean? At the time that we made a relatively positive video about the diet, and you can see in that video, I'm just partly supporting her, and we're talking about problems in the relationship, we're talking about a number of issues. When she first started the diet, she was still eating oatmeal, and believe it or not, oatmeal is relatively high fat. If the staple of your diet is oatmeal, you're eating oatmeal all day in large quantities, you're actually getting a good amount of fat. And at that point, her acne was okay, and she was working out at the gym, and she had a relatively balanced and okay diet, okay? What Nina and Randa's diet instructs you to do is, if you're not getting results, commit to it even more, and keep eliminating more and more normal foods. So she kept eliminating foods, she kept doing more reading. So the oatmeal had to be eliminated. Rice had to be eliminated. Fruit had to be eliminated. Sweet potatoes could no longer be baked. Now they could only be boiled. Oil, there was absolutely no fat in her diet at all. She went from having a low-fat diet to an extremely low-fat diet to a really zero-fat diet. And her acne got worse when there was less fat in her diet. And when there were little hiccups where she had a little bit more fat in her diet, I noticed that her acne got better. Just once, I pointed that out to her. And she screamed at me and got all emotionally upset at me, over this. And I said, look, I have proof, I have evidence. We have YouTube videos from these different periods of time. And we had a few photographs, but it was really the YouTube videos. I said, look, show you this video. You can see, your skin got worse and worse and worse. And then it got better when you had a little bit more fat in your diet. So again, keep in mind, the range of fat we're talking about here. This is the difference between low fat and extremely low fat. That's the range, like low fat and absolute zero fat. We're not talking about switching to a high fat diet. We're not talking about anything like that. And a couple days later, she admitted to me, she calmed down, she agreed. She said, yeah, when you go back and look at that. But then this isn't the only theory these books present you with. She then started looking at the fact that spikes in blood sugar can correspond to acne. So this was the justification for eliminating rice. White rice did seem to cause acne. For eliminating fruit, this diet became more and more extreme. And by the way, during this whole period of time, she mentions in her video, she says that I was loving and supportive. For me, I didn't care that she had acne at all. I mean, the actual appearance of her face got worse and worse. I mean, she can attest to this. I was a very patient and loving boyfriend in that respect. She had to travel everywhere with boiled beans. I mean, before it was rice and beans. Before that, it was oatmeal. But she had these plastic portable... I bought her the containers. She had these portable containers, reusable containers with a snap-on lid. So at first it was oatmeal, later rice and beans. Then after that, just beans. And again, at one point she had sweet potatoes and couldn't have roasted sweet potatoes anymore. But she had to have pre-cooked food that she carried with her everywhere, including obviously to the airport. But even a couple times we went out to a restaurant to see her parents, and she had to bring food with her. She had to have a pressure cooker in the hotel room when we were in hotel rooms together to be able to boil things so she could eat something and maintain perfectly her commitment to this absolute zero fat diet. So that part of it, believe it or not, wasn't a problem for me as a boyfriend, okay? The problem was that my girlfriend was having a dogmatic, anti-science view that she was extremely emotionally attached to, and she was going through this kind of downward spiral of self-justification because her acne was getting worse and worse, her diet was getting more and more restrictive, and she wanted so much to believe that she would be healed if only she could be 100% purified by this ridiculous diet. All right? And again, starting right at the beginning, it doesn't make sense. It does not make sense. Okay? If your problem was that acne for you is caused by almonds or peanuts, then eliminating those things will have that effect. If in your case you have acne because you were eating a ton of oily donuts, that the grease levels of donuts are creating oil in your skin, and then eliminating that has that effect for you, great. None of us have statistics. Maybe there's some significant number of people statistically for whom that's their scenario. Okay, but let's say hypothetically that you're a woman who has acne, and the reason why is PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now, within that, there's a whole range of possibilities. I talked to one woman directly. She got acne, and she ended up needing surgery, multiple surgeries to remove cysts from her reproductive tract. Why? Because the acne was hormonal. Okay? So the acne is a symptom. It's a symptom of what? It's a symptom of a hormonal problem. And in that case, the hormonal problem is caused by a cyst that needs to be removed by surgery. There is absolutely no way that eating Nina and Randa's diet could solve that problem. There's no way it's even going to lead you to a diagnosis. On the contrary, what it's going to lead you to do is avoid getting the diagnosis. Avoid even thinking through that possibility, because you're going to blame yourself for not, well, at least this is my girlfriend's mentality, you're going to blame yourself for not being committed enough to a diet. You're going to go through the checklist. You're going to go through this ever more rigorous cycle saying, oh, well, gee, I don't know, there's still some fat in the oatmeal. Let's eliminate oatmeal. Eliminate soy. Oh, well, gee, fruit causes sugar spikes. They only allow you to have a tiny amount of fruit every day. But if it's not working, then you commit further by eliminating fruit altogether. On and on and on it goes. And the outcome is, if you have hormonal acne because you have a hormonal problem, the results can only be devastating. And in my girlfriend's case, it was psychologically devastating and emotionally devastating, in addition to just meaning that for more than 3 months, it felt like 6 months, I forget how many months this experiment went on for. For many, many months, she had absolutely horrible acne. And it also, of course, negatively impacted things like job interviews. It impacted her status as a student in China. It impacted her whole life terribly. I still loved her. I still supported her. The fact that her face was completely transformed by acne. I mean, you guys, I think you'll never see photographs of her during the worst period of acne. And again, all I said from the very beginning, she wanted to take all of her medicine and throw it in the garbage. That for her was the resolution. Her resolution in her mind was she had a period of her life before where she was misled by doctors, and now that was over because she's found like the truth, the religious gospel truth preached by Nina and Randa and backed up apparently by respectable vegan doctors who are quoted in this book. I don't know if those guys really back this diet. And now all those drugs would go in the garbage, and she was going to start this new period of life being liberated, and she was going to start tracking her period and her menstrual cycle for herself, and natural birth control, and natural cure, natural. You can also die a natural death, okay? The fact, this is medieval. This is a mentality straight out of the Dark Ages. And for me, it's especially ironic that my girlfriend fell into this loop because she fell in love with me watching me criticize others for exactly this mentality on YouTube. And then here I was, like in our apartment face to face, trying to talk her through this as gently as possible, repeatedly again and again. Like, no, even with the issue with the actual medication, I said, no, you have to keep the medication with you. You have to keep the medication with you so that if this experiment fails, you're going to go back on your medication, right? This is medication that worked for you for 10 years, approximately. So if you're going to have an experiment of trying to treat your acne through diet and without this medication, you have to be prepared for the possibility that the experiment will fail. And if it fails, you may get back on this medication. You may also have to go back to the endocrinologist or go back to the dermatologist. You may have to go back to seek medical help, right? Because you are taking this experiment on at your own risk. My girlfriend responded to this viciously. This is not the only reason why we broke up. This is not the only reason why my girlfriend has been abusive towards me during the last year or last 2 years. It's not. But my girlfriend responded to this by denouncing me, insulting me, screaming at me, as if, she took different tactics at different times. You freaked out about this. But she attacked me as if the problem was I didn't believe in her. She attacked me as if the problem was that I only cared about my own pleasure and my own convenience, like as if I wanted to go back on the birth control pill for that reason, that I didn't appreciate her struggle against these horrible doctors in the medical establishment. It was, she didn't do this halfway, okay? It was all the way crazy. And this didn't just happen once. This resentment she had against me exhibited itself again and again. And the last time it exhibited itself, which was the breaking point for her, I think, because it was just so absurd. The very last time she did this, she was actually screaming at me, screaming that the reason she had acne was me, that I was the cause of her acne, not the diet, not the medication, not quitting the medication, not these other things. Okay? So her emotional and mental state got worse and worse. Her diet got worse and worse. And her skin got worse and worse. Partly because, I say, at the beginning, when her skin was okay, she had more fat in her diet. She had a more reasonable diet. And during the brief periods during the experiment where the fat in her diet went back up again, probably because having more fat let her hormonal system operate a little bit more normally. Okay. I am not going to list all the details. I think it's quite likely my girlfriend will make more videos talking about the details. But let me just say, during this period of time, the acne, which we knew to be hormonal, it wasn't like a mystery to determine, is this hormonal acne, or is it caused by an allergy to nuts, or is it caused by oil in your diet? No. We knew from day one this was hormonal acne. During the period of this experiment, the acne was not the only symptom of an underlying hormonal condition, of an underlying endocrinological, pardon me, an underlying problem with her endocrine system, something to do with the balance of hormones in the body. She did have other symptoms, and obviously during all the years that she was on the birth control pill, those had been more or less suppressed. She sent me a screenshot of somebody's comment on Facebook. I thought about sharing it here, but I'm just going to paraphrase it. It was a woman in a Facebook group discussing this who said of herself, look, a lot of you want to think this diet is going to solve all your problems, but the acne itself, in many cases, not all cases, in many cases, the acne itself is only a symptom of some other real underlying problem. And she said that in her case, she had acne. She thought she could cure the acne. She could just deal with the problem. That's not the reality. For her, she ended up having surgery. She had some kind of cyst or growth or cancer somewhere in her reproductive system. And it could be related to the ovaries. It could be related to the thyroid. There are various stages and possibilities where something can be wrong that's knocking your hormones out of balance. And if you think first eliminating soy and then eliminating oats and then eliminating rice and eliminating fruit, if you think that this elimination diet can bring you closer to the truth, I got to tell you something. It can also bring you closer to insanity.